All right. So I think that this is a really good video for me to put out. And I almost didn't upload it because I kind of fell into that YouTube trap. You know, I was like, there's not enough B-roll. It's not interesting enough, but it's just a stream of consciousness. But the reason I'm going to upload it is because this video is all about what happens to my brain when I'm A, involved in a project, and B, I have a camera that makes me not even think about another camera. Even though it's not the greatest in terms of specs and things like that, I have a camera that gets out of my way and works for me and allows me to make art, allows me to do whatever I want without, I got bugs falling all over me here. I have a camera that I love. I have a camera that allows me to make art. And so I think there's so much good information in this video, I think if you really pay attention to it and try to extract, the good stuff, I think it's of great value. I screwed up a couple of things. I kind of lost my focus when I had to stop at one point and get some water because I had swallowed something down the wrong pipe and I was coughing. And so just to be clear, I made my first film on my phone. It might seem like I'm talking about the Sony A6400 or the S5, but I made my first feature on my phone on an LG V40. I made my second feature on the Panasonic S5. The second feature just debuted at the Manhattan Film Festival. My first feature is on a bunch of streaming services, Tubi TV, and it's also here at YouTube if you don't want to pay for it. So anyway, that's all I want to say. I wanted to put this out because I think it's got so much great information. I also know, without a doubt, that 90% of the people who start watching it, I'm going to lose them pretty quickly because there's no B-roll, there's no great transitions, there's no funny stuff or anything like that. It's just real talk, and it's straight talk. But if you hang in there, it goes through, like some chapters in a way. And I think if you're serious about making art, if you're serious about thinking about how maybe trying to watch a million camera reviews and deciding which camera and what specs are best for you to have might be actually stopping you from making art, then I think you can get a lot out of this video. So, I hope you'll check it out. And that's all I want to say about it. So let it roll. And if you hang in there, I appreciate that. And if not, I ain't mad at you at all. But I do know that once you get your camera, what am I doing in this video? I'm talking about stories. I'm talking about experiences. I'm talking about going out there and doing it. I'm not talking about specs. I'm not talking about dynamic range. I'm not talking about the color science of my camera. I'm not talking about any of that. I mean, are we even remotely interested in any camera reviews anymore? Like, seriously? Are we still watching 20 million reviews on 17 trillion different cameras? Because, 5 or 6 of them come out every week, Like the S9 came out and people went crazy over that. Some people said it's the greatest camera ever and other people said it was complete garbage. And then the GH7 came out, and that's almost the perfect camera. Micro Four Thirds is not dead, it's alive. And pretty soon somebody's going to say full frame is dead. I mean, is it even interesting anymore? I don't know. Honestly, when I first started looking at these videos, right, I was just getting into filmmaking. I was like a theater artist transitioning because the pandemic just shut me down. So I needed an outlet, and I needed to learn something really fast because I had a story that I needed to tell, like immediately. And so I just devoured a billion, videos on YouTube, and I learned about all these different cameras. But what I really learned was what ISO meant, what white balance was, and how to set your white balance, what dynamic range was about. Like, I learned about cameras, You know, I learned about filmmaking. You know, I learned about cinematography. I learned about photography. You know, all the from the nuance to the tech to everything. And every video that I watched was remarkable. It was incredible. I couldn't believe how much information was out there for free. It was like I went to film school, and trust me, I took it all in. And the thing was, I took it and I went out every day and I shot every single day. Like, I didn't just learn it. I went out there and did it every single day until I said, you know what, I know enough. I'm going to take my phone, because at that time I only had a phone, and I'm going to make a movie. And I made a full-length feature, because to me it didn't make any sense. Like, why would I even make a short? I mean, my plays are like 2 hours, 2.5 hours long. It just didn't make any sense to me. Like, why would anybody put the kind of effort in that it takes to make a movie and make one that's 5 minutes long or 12 or even 20 minutes? Like, for what? So I said, I'm going to make a feature. Crazy as I was, that's the way I was thinking. And then I did that. I did it successfully. You know, I was really happy with it. And I think part of it was that I really kind of was like flying by the seat of my pants. And, you know, I was just self-taught. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was applying everything that I learned. I was doing everything manually, which was really great. But, you know, and then at the same time, I was learning how to use DaVinci Resolve. So I was learning how to edit and how to color. And I was studying directors and cinematographers talking about color and how to choose the primary color of your film and what that means and the differences between lenses and why you would use a certain lens for a different kind of shot, and the difference between long lenses and wide angle lenses and ND filters and black pro mist filters and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I learned so much. And I applied it. And then I decided to do a second film. And then I wanted to buy a camera. So I bought a Sony a6400. And honestly, the reason I bought that camera was because at that moment, that was the hot camera. Like, they had just had an event where they invited all these YouTubers out to LA. You know, like, I don't know where it was, but it was off some island in LA. And yeah, the Sony a6400 was like the thing. The greatest, you know, the greatest autofocus ever. 4K, you know, like 4K 30. It was the camera. So I said, I'm going to buy it, because we had just gotten a pandemic payment. I took that money and I bought a camera, and I bought a Sony 35mm f1.8 lens, and I had a kit. That was it. Oh, and it came with the kit lens too. And I took that camera and I maxed it out. I mean, I did everything I could possibly do with that camera. I made YouTube videos. I completely embarrassed myself, I'm sure, because they were terrible videos, but I learned. You know, at first, honestly, I thought the 35mm lens was broken, because I didn't really know what f1.8 like really meant. And I was like, it's broken. Like, I can't get it to focus, you know, and if it focuses, it's focused for like 1 centimeter. And so I called the guy who sold it to me and I was like, yo, it's broken. Either that or the camera's broken, like something's broken. And he's like, nah, you're broken. Like, you have no idea what you're doing or talking about. And so then I learned, you know, then I sold the 35mm and I got these adapters because I had 2 full frame Minolta vintage lenses that I found in my father's camera bag, and I adapted them to my camera, to the Sony a6400. And even though it was APS-C, my 28mm was a 42mm, and my 50mm was a 75mm, and I learned how to use those vintage lenses. And then I really started to get deeper and deeper into, as I said, the nuance of filmmaking, you know, like really getting into how manually focusing is so important to the process of choosing your composition and what you want the frame to look like and how you can make the frame look like a painting. And then I got into the lighting and I started to really study lighting, and I started to go to the Museum of Natural History and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And I started to go to all, because, you know, I was lucky because I was living in New York City, which is basically like every major museum in the world. And I started to just look at pictures, and I started to study photographers, you know, still photographers, and looking at their pictures and kind of, you know, trying to analyze the lighting and how it made the depth of the film, the depth of the image move, you know. I really studied Gordon Parks deeply because I'm a social activist too. And, you know, Gordon Parks famously said that the camera was his weapon of choice to deal with social justice and things like that. And, He's an amazing photographer, and I learned a lot about filmmaking through watching, studying his work. And then I was just devouring all these filmmakers on YouTube, This guy, Brandon Lee, was probably my favorite at that time, and Danny Gevirtz, everybody's favorite, and, Matty Hapoya, and Gerald Undone, of course, and Make Art Now, that guy, I don't remember his name, Potato Jet, like I watched all of them. And actually, most of the people I was watching were kind of Sony people, and so I thought I was going to stay with Sony. But then, when I knew I was about to do another project, I had written a script. Actually, I had a play that was supposed to open, but it got shut down by COVID. So I said, I'm going to make a movie out of this script. So I adapted that theatrical script into a screenplay. And I realized I'm going to be shooting a lot in the dark. And so I thought to myself, my lenses, my 28 millimeter, which I'm going to use most of the time, because at the time, I was using my 28 millimeter, but it was really a 42 millimeter. And so anyway, it was only an f2.8, which is, only. I mean, f2.8 is fine, but it was APS-C f2.8, so it wasn't really an f2.8. And so I decided I wanted to get a full frame camera, and so I sold everything. And at that point, I had bought so many lenses, I bought all the cheap lenses, all the Samyangs and the Rokinons and all that stuff. I would never spend more than like $100, $115 on a lens. I sold everything. The Sony a6400, all my Sony lenses. I had the 18-105, of course, which is a great lens. I sold my gimbal. I sold all the lenses, everything, and I got a Panasonic S5, the original. And that was it. Of course, I still have my father's lenses. So, excuse me, I swallowed something wrong there. I got some adapters for the Panasonic, for the L mount. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, 28 millimeters is 28 millimeters. And 50 millimeters is 50 millimeters. And I was like, oh. And then I just shot every day, all day, every day, until I just felt it, like I knew what it was going to look like. It just became my field of vision, the way I looked at the world. It was like I put 28 millimeters in my brain, and 50 millimeters in my heart. And I started to see the world in that way. And I knew I was going to shoot mostly in the dark. And I learned a lot about ISO, and I studied, excuse me, sorry. And I studied, people who shot in low light circumstances, and I really studied my lighting and my composition and my colors and things like that. I'm going to shut this down for a second, get some water. But I wanted that film to be like HBO-worthy film, you know what I mean? Like something that could stream on Amazon, Netflix, HBO, Showtime, whatever. And I think I accomplished that. Not that it got on any of those channels, but it was definitely on that level, And I got to express the story that I didn't get to do as a play. And I just felt satisfied with that. I was happy. I mean, it took me a couple of years to finish the whole thing. And I was very proud of it, and we won a bunch of awards, and I had an incredible original score. Steve Peckman, my friend, who's a John Coltrane level musician, I asked him to do the score, and he did it, and it's all live, and it is astoundingly beautiful. And so we won like Best Indie Feature, Best Actor, Best Original Score a bunch of times. Like, we won so many laurels, but every festival was virtual because it was the pandemic. So it was kind of disappointing, And so anyway, I shot this second film, took another couple of years. It was like the end of a trilogy. I shot the whole thing with the S5, and I used my father's two lenses, the Minolta 28mm f2.8, a Telesur lens, which is a vintage lens, and a Minolta Rokkor 50mm f1.4, which I used as well. I used them about equal, like I used them appropriately for when I felt 50 millimeters was necessary and 28 millimeters. And that's pretty much what I shoot at, 28 and 50. I have two anamorphic lenses that I use quite a bit, and one is a 35 millimeters, so it's really a 52 millimeter because they're APS-C lenses, and I have a 75 millimeter, so that's really 110 or whatever. I'm not doing the math in my head, 108, So that's a little bit different for me. When I shoot anamorphic, I really do have to adjust, but basically I'm a 28-50 shooter. I know Mark Bowen, one of my favorite filmmakers, is a 24-50 shooter, but I'm used to 28 millimeters, and I love it. I think it looks great. It doesn't really get distorted. I'm pretty close to the camera right now. Like I'm, probably 3.5 feet from the camera, and I'm not distorted. You know, like 24, 20, 16, you start to get distorted if you get this close to the camera. So anyway, I shot the whole film, and I guess I say all this to say that my camera of choice, my weapon of choice is the Panasonic S5, the original, you know. The S5 II and the S5 IIX came out, you know, not too long after I bought this, and I felt a certain kind of way about that at first, but then I was like, I don't use autofocus, and I don't need 6K and open gate, and I don't do client work like that. You know, I don't really do that, so it didn't make a difference to me. I mean, now I am doing some client work, and I'm getting ready to shoot a documentary, and I just did a short film for somebody, and, you know, open gate, I can see the advantages for social media with that. But honestly, I have no problem creating content for social media. I actually can put the S5 into anamorphic mode, and that shoots in 4:3, and so it's almost kind of sort of open gate, because I'm using almost the entire sensor on this camera, and I do get a lot more vertical, you know, room on my footage. So you know, it's not a big deal. You know, I don't need open gate, perfect open gate, you know, and I don't need 6K or 8K or whatever the hell the S5 II and the S5 IIX, and I don't need ProRes RAW, and I'm not trying to have, you know, like 90 million gigabytes of stuff when I don't need it. You know, my footage looks incredible. It looks like a movie, you know. Everything I shoot just looks like a movie. So, I mean, to me, so I'm happy with it. I don't feel, you know, want for anything. And so I say all that to say, I became really bored with, you know, camera videos. You know, I was addicted to them. But the more I just continued to watch, I was like, I'm just not interested in this, you know? Like, I found myself just watching camera conspiracies most of the time because he was at least like funny and engaging, and, you know, I really didn't care what he was talking about, because really nothing that he talks about is of any interest to me. Like, I don't care about the lenses. I'm not a, you know, a shooter of wildlife and birds and squirrels and stuff like that. I'm not a vlogger. I don't care about any of it, but I love his channel because it's engaging and it's fun. And he's a funny guy, and he's and he's really smart. And it just made me realize, like, if Gerald Undone is, you know, reviewing a camera now, or some of these other, you know, filmmakers who I really respect, I couldn't be less interested, and I couldn't be more bored. Like, I don't care. And I'm sure if I get to the point where I feel like the S5 is like a brick wall for me, and I need to get past something in this camera that's holding me back, then I will start looking at reviews of the cameras that I'm interested in. And I guarantee you it's not going to be hard for me to pick a camera that's going to work for me, because I'm going to choose a camera based on the stories that I tell, the style that I shoot in, the way that I present and communicate my stories. That's the camera I'm going to choose. So, you know, I'll look at some reviews, and, you know, I'll think a lot about my budget and how much I want to spend and what I can use with the lenses that I like, you know, because I'm vintage and anamorphic all the way. And it won't be a big deal for me, you know. My audio has nothing to do with the camera. I don't care if I could shoot directly into the camera, because, you know, like, again, I've said this before, syncing audio, come on, that's not hard. It takes like 30 seconds. It's not a big deal. Most, you know, softwares do it pretty much automatically for you, but I don't even know how DaVinci Resolve does it automatically, because I just slate it and then I line it up and it's perfect. It's like so easy. So don't let anybody tell you that's difficult. You know, just get an audio setup that's the best possible audio setup that you can afford, because the audio that you include with your video is just as important as the video, like everybody tells you. And it's absolutely true, you know. So I was using a Zoom H1N for a long time, but I broke it, and, you know, it still works, but it's kind of inconsistent. It's got some crackly stuff going on, and so I wound up buying this Hollyland Lark Max, and I didn't even buy the whole thing. You know, I just bought the one microphone and the single receiver, and so I didn't get the charging case or anything. And now I'm kind of regretting it, because I'm doing this documentary, and I could have used the second mic, so I'm going to wind up buying, I'll probably wind up buying the whole thing, and then I'll have 3 mics, which will be good. And I'll have 2 receivers, because I also have a Panasonic GH5, and I'll use that as my second camera for this documentary. And then I can, you know, have all my audio hooked up like that. So get your audio hooked up, but don't worry about it going directly into the camera, because it doesn't matter. And what I do, I put the receiver on the camera, I record the audio into the camera, but I also have the audio recording internally to this microphone. So if anything happens I'm covered, you know. And outside I have my little wind filter, and actually for narrative or documentary work, you would never see this because this is ugly as fuck. I hate the way it looks, so I'll hide it and I'll use a lavalier mic. I have a Purple Panda lavalier, which has incredible sound quality, really good, I guess you'll call it dynamic range. I mean, you know, whatever little diaphragm is in it works really well, and it can handle from whispering to screaming, you know. So I'll just attach it to this, hide it somewhere, and you won't see it, and the audio will be on point, full stop, perfect. So that's my story with cameras. I'm bored. I don't want to watch anymore. I don't care about the GH7 or the S9 or the, you know, Panasonic S5 2X or the A7S3, or if an A7S4 comes out, like FX3, like if somebody gave me one of these cameras, great, I would love it. I mean, I'm not saying they're not incredible, awesome, magnificent, like amazing creative tools, but I don't care, you know what I mean? Like if somebody, you know, if I became a big YouTuber and these companies sent me stuff, of course I would take it. Who's stupid enough not to take it, you know what I mean? But I don't need it, you know what I mean? I'm so happy with the Panasonic S5 because it allows me to do whatever I want. And so, let's go to the next subject. I want to talk about my film, This Is the End for Me. The second film that I was talking about, the one that I shot on the Panasonic S5 with my 2 Minolta lenses. And it just had its world premiere at the Manhattan Film Festival, which showed at Cinema Village down in Union Square, Manhattan, which is this legendary old theater. It's perfect for my kind of work. It's grimy and gritty and real New York, and that's my style. And it was a dream. And the dream was that I'm a solo theater artist. I'm a performing artist. And if I tell you, I've never been nervous getting on stage, ever. I have never, not one time have I been nervous doing a play. And I'm a solo artist. So I'm getting on stage all by myself in front of a full house of people, an audience, telling a story for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and hoping that the audience stays engaged and doesn't get bored and people don't start getting up and walking out and everybody's embarrassed and feels bad. Like, I have to make sure people are absolutely compelled and stuck on me and they can't move and they're just paralyzed and they're living in this world that I created. Like, I've never been nervous because I know I can deliver that. I know it. I was born to do this work, so I feel confident, you know. And I'm actually very shy in real life. You know, I'm very quiet. A lot of people think I hate them when they meet me because I don't talk much, which is maybe hard to believe watching this video, but I'm painfully shy. Theater actually saved my life because that just kind of changed me and opened me up quite a bit. Because interestingly, the only place I really feel safe is on stage. That's where I feel the most powerful, the most me, the most grounded, you know, the most centered. I don't know why, but it's just always been that way. But for the premiere of my film, I was mad nervous, like crazy nervous, because I shot the film 4K 10-bit 422, which I could do in the Panasonic S5, 24 frames per second, of course. I only had one shot that I shot at 60 because I had one slow motion shot at the end, because I'm not really into slow motion. It looks kind of cheesy to me most of the time, or it just looks like a YouTube video and not a narrative film. But there was one shot where I had it in my head like slow motion and I used it, you know. But I shot 24 frames per second and I edited it, I colored it, I did everything, you know. And I was nervous. I was like, I knew that it looked great on the computer, even cast to a TV, you know, because I have a Chromecast. I knew that it looked great like online. But I didn't know what it was going to look like on a big screen in a real theater. And I didn't know what it was going to sound like. And Steve Peckman did the score for this film as well. And so, you know, like, he gave me magnificent music to mix into my film, but I mixed it into the film. And, you know, I don't think he had it mastered, but it was mixed perfectly. It sounded like it was mastered. I mean, it was beautiful, and it's all live. It's incredible. And by the way, shout out Barbara Annell and Ian Smith, who contributed to the music, two incredible musicians. But, you know, I was responsible for the editing, so all the levels, all the EQ, everything. I had to make sure that the audio was on point, that the dialogue sounded like when you go to the movies, you know, like that's a movie, you know. I had to make sure I did it well, and I had to make sure that it wasn't pixelated or that too dark, or, you know, that my exposure was right, my white, that the colors that I chose mattered and looked well and worked for the story. Like, I didn't know what it was going to look like in a real theater. I was fucking nervous. And so I got to the theater and the movie started, and it's funny, they didn't introduce it. I thought it's a festival, they're going to introduce it, and I hadn't been to any in-person festivals yet with my filmmaking. I've done a plethora of theater festivals all over the world already, and they always introduce you, and it's more theatrical, I guess this is cinematic, means they just turn it on, like the lights go down in the theater, and you see the stream of light, going over people, that beam of light, and all of a sudden, it's a movie. And the music started, and it just filled the theater, and it was rich, and it was full, and it was dynamic, and it was beautiful. And the first scene comes, and it's a scene of Lower Manhattan, and you can see the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge, and then there's some text at the beginning of my movie, and it was gorgeous. And I got chills, I was shaking. I almost started crying. But I was sitting next to this woman that I didn't know, and she was I think a PR person or something, and she was there to see the film, and I felt like I couldn't really just be, you know what I mean? Like I had to keep myself together. But man, I was overwhelmed because it was exactly what I wanted. It was perfect. It was gorgeous, And I thought about my mother, and I thought about my father, who never got to see me, even in the theater. They both died before I left the music business and wound up in the theater. They never saw me play to an open house on, off Broadway or whatever. Like, they never got to see that. They never got to see my filmmaking. I thought about my grandmother, who was my best friend. I thought about my best friend, Gene Giles, who died many years ago, right after 9/11. And he just knew I was a football player. He knew I was a guitar player and in the music business, but, all these people didn't get to see it, but I felt so proud. And I felt so good for Steve, because his music was represented so well. I mean, Steve is like on a level of Ennio Morricone, great, person who a composer and arranger who does scores for films, I mean, he's on that level. Hans Zimmer, he's on that level. So I was so happy for him that, I was able to mix it in and represent him well, and make him proud and make him happy. And to the musicians as well, and to all the supporters. I have so many people who support me. My computer broke down in the middle of editing, and I had to do a fundraiser to get a new computer, and all these people stepped up, and I was able to get an M2 Mac, and finish the project. And so there's that. And that's what a camera can do for you. The Panasonic S5 did all of that for me. If this story is interesting to you, you can do this, because there's a Panasonic S5. You could buy it for $800 right now. The lenses that I have, you can get for like $200 combined. You can find these Minolta lenses really cheap. So I digress. The third part of my story is about a woman named J.J. Chang. And J.J. Chang was representing a film called Golden Coast at the Manhattan Film Festival. And I saw that film, and it was a shorter film than mine. I think it was about 20 minutes long. And it was a beautiful story. And to be honest with you, when it first came on the screen, it was jarring to me, because I think they shot it at 120 frames per second or something like that, but they didn't slow it down. And so it was a war movie. And I think they did that on purpose. It was like, it was not what you usually see. It was probably more like what battle feels like when you're in the middle of it, I think Full Metal Jacket was shot like that, but I'm not sure. But anyway, it was jarring, and they were shooting with long lenses, but close. So, people's faces were like right in your face. It was like really right there, very intimate. And it was a story about a guy who was in the war. I'm not sure which war it was, I forget now. And there was a journalist, a young journalist with him. And so this veteran, who obviously had been through war, like he was a veteran, and he was, his vibe was perfect for being in the middle of a war where people are dying, where you're probably scared out of your fucking brains all the time. And then there's this young journalist who's like, a young guy trying to get a story, and he's all brave, but he doesn't really understand what's going on. And so you see what's going on between the two of them. And actually, what I love about the story, and I love about the way the actor made these choices, was that the veteran, he was very sensitive and had a lot of empathy towards his kid, but you could tell that he also thought he was kind of an idiot, you know what I mean? But when you're young, you're supposed to be an idiot, right? You're supposed to be stupid, and he was stupid, but he was, spitting vinegar, and he was going to get that story. And he was in the middle of a war. He was all wearing his stuff, and so anyway, they're going back and forth talking about stuff, and he's asking stupid questions, and the veteran is being cool with him, but he's also like looking around because they're in the middle of a war. They could get bombed or shot or whatever at any moment, And then all of a sudden, the journalist like freaks out because he realized he left his notebook out in the brush or wherever they were before. They were in the middle of the jungle. And he's like, I got to go back and get it. I got to go back and get it. Like all of his notes, everything he was going to write about, he left it out there. And finally, they're going back and forth. And the veteran says to him, yo, you're not going, well, he didn't say yo because I think he was Asian or something like that. But anyway, not that Asians don't say yo, but you know what I mean. He didn't say yo, but he said, you're not going. He said, I'll go get it. Because he knew that this kid would go out there and die because he was not prepared to go out there on his own, to go looking for his notes. So of course, and this is kind of predictable, I guess, but the soldier goes out there and you hear poof, like a giant boom. And of course, it's either a grenade or a bomb or something, and he's injured and he dies. He does come back and he gives him the notes, but he dies. And, this young journalist, he just like freaks out, he just freaks out. And anyway, I'm not going to tell you any more of that story because maybe it's going to turn into a feature at some point. I really enjoyed it. And what I loved about it was that there was a similar storyline in one of my favorite series of all time. There's a series on HBO called Station 11. And there was a moment just like that where somebody had left something in the woods that was really important to him. And it was a little kid. And, he wanted to go out and get it. But this adult who was watching over this person, because they were stuck in this pandemic and it was like, nobody could go outside and it was a weird time. The adult went out and went out looking for this thing. And horrible things happened. And it actually disconnected them. And I don't want to tell you too much, but trust me when I tell you, if you have HBO Max, watch Station 11. Because also, I think it's 7 episodes. And if you watch the whole thing and if you get to the final episode, you will see one of the greatest moments in the history of cinema, in my opinion. Like the most beautiful moment that will change you forever. You will never forget that moment. And you have to have watched all 7 episodes to feel it and to get it. But if you do allow yourself to get there, it is like the greatest, it will be the greatest moment of your life, other than maybe getting married or having a child or something like that. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's the most satisfying, moving, you will fall apart. It's so beautiful. And it's silent and it's small, but it's so impactful. And watching this short film, Golden Coast, made me think about Station 11. And so I say all that to say, I don't know what kind of crew they had to make that film. I don't know how many cameras I don't know, whatever. But I do know that once you get your camera, what am I doing in this video? I'm talking about stories. I'm talking about experiences. I'm talking about going out there and doing it. I'm not talking about specs. I'm not talking about dynamic range. I'm not talking about the color science of my camera. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about stories, because at the end of the day, you could tell these stories any way you want to. You might prefer to shoot them with longer lenses, or you might prefer wide angle lenses. You might choose different colors. You might want to use autofocus because of the way the story is going. I mean, personally, I can't imagine that, but whatever, because I'm all manual. I mean, what I'm saying is that you're not going to give a shit about any of this stuff, because once you get your camera, and once you get your gear and your lighting and your sound equipment, it becomes second nature. Like, you know how to do it. You don't need to learn it anymore. It becomes like having a conversation. You know how to talk. You don't have to think about the words that you're saying. It just comes out. It's just an exchange, I mean, I consider this an exchange. Like, I'm a solo theater artist. I'm an actor. So when I sit in front of the camera like this, I am picturing people looking at me, And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be kind of rude because I'm just going to keep talking because nobody's talking back to me. But I'm picturing you. I'm picturing your eyes. I'm picturing the way your faces look and the way you're sitting and your body language. And that's the way it is. And that's what you're going to focus on, your story. The exchange, the communication, the emotion, the empathy, the drama, the conflict, the resolution, the exposition, all of it, you know, the beginning, the middle, the end. That's what you're going to think about. You're not going to think about 32-bit float. You're not going to care about that. You're just going to hope, you're going to know how to use that, and it's going to work, and it's going to enable you to tell the story. You're not going to think about it. You're not going to think about, damn, I can't believe I didn't get the S5 IIX, I got the S5 II, or I can't believe I'm using a Fuji XH2S instead of a Canon, you know, R5C. Like, it ain't going to matter. You're going to be way past that. You're going to be telling stories. And you're not going to care about camera reviews or anything until you either break your camera or want to upgrade or whatever, but you're going to be in stories. You're going to be a filmmaker, an artist. You're going to be contributing. You're going to be wanting to share this work with other people. And that's all about community. And that's going to fill you up, I'm telling you. So, yeah, that's what was on my mind. And JJ Chang, the thing that I love about her is that at the Q&A of my film, she stood up, and it was so clear to me that she got everything about my film, everything. You know, she talked about how, oh, I love how you use the big infrastructure and wide lenses to show how small we are in the world, you know, because my film is about mental illness and suicide, and she went through it, you know what I mean? Like, she really got it. And so she's a real artist's heart, you know what I mean? And her film, you know, like, I remember when her film ended, she was trying to get people to ask questions, you know, because she wanted, at first I was like, what is she doing? You know what I mean? And she's a PR person, but then, you know, the more I've gotten to know her, the more I realized that she is so genuine and so real. She's such an artist, you know, and she's such, you know, the embodiment, the full embodiment of what an artist should be and what a filmmaker is, what a theater artist is, what a musician is, because she cares about the story. You know, she talked about war. She talked about loss and death, and you know, and how it affects humanity. You know, she talked about my story, and you know, how mental health and suicide and being solitary and not being around people and being all up inside of your own head, and then how to show that visually with film, and how impactful it was for her, and how it moved her, and how she said she was honored to see the film. That's how I felt looking at her film. You know, and so JJ Chang, I'm so grateful that I went to this festival and that I got to meet people like JJ Chang. You know, and I got to see a film like Golden Coast, and I saw some other amazing films. But that's what it's all about. You know, when you get your camera, you're going to be able to finish a movie, and then you're going to be able to meet people like JJ Chang and Steve Peckman, who did my score. And if you're lucky enough, you'll get him to do your score, and you'll get to meet me, and then I won't shut up. And you'll have to figure out how to get a word in edgewise and how to stop me, because I'm a solo theater artist and I talk too much. And I should probably end this now, so I'm going to end this now. But you know what? I'm just saying, forget about all this tech stuff, this camera stuff. Like, you know what? I take that back. Get into it. Learn all the tech. Devour it. Watch every video that you can, but then make the move. Like, pull the trigger, buy a camera, and then tell stories. Forget about all this stuff until the next time you need to buy a camera. Because, you know, camera companies are coming out with new cameras like every 3 or 4 months now. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. Why are they doing that? Because they know you'll buy them. Because they know that you're going to buy the GH7, but guess what? When the A7S III comes out, well, the A7S4 or whatever they're going to call it comes out in a couple of months or a year or whatever, you're going to feel bad that you bought the GH7 or the S9 or whatever. Like, if you bought the Sony A7C II, you feel shitty right now because you didn't get the S9. A lot of people, you know what I mean? People who have the GH5, you know, they're so loyal to it, but, you know, they feel a certain kind of way because they want the GH6 or the GH7, you know. People who got the Sony A6400, when it came out, it was like, oh my God, this is the most incredible camera, you know. And then all of a sudden the FX30, you know, and it's like, it just never ends. It never ends. But it's not even important, because what's important is getting yourself your Blackmagic or your Panasonic Lumix or whatever, and mastering it, and then telling stories and sharing stories. Because you know why? Because we need you. Because the world is fucked up. We need art. And art is the only thing that, you know, art heals for real. It heals for real. Yeah, I've said enough. I'm going to end it on that. Art heals. All right.